Welcome back, Richard. It's good to see you on this fine Easter weekend.
That's right, Easter weekend.
Yes.
Everything was empty yesterday afternoon. Everybody was celebrating things. So
Yeah.
Happy Easter to you.
To you as well. And today, when we think about holidays, what do we think about? We think about relationships. We think about family and friends getting together and interacting. And it just so happens, coincidentally enough, we're going to talk about that a little bit today, but we're going to talk about it as it relates to probably one of the biggest things, the most common things, one of the most influential things that are affecting relationships right now, and that's our cell phones.
Exactly. I don't know about you, because we didn't really see a lot of each other this week. It seemed like a fast week or something.
Yeah.
But something was wrong this week. I don't know what it was. It just seemed like everybody was busier than usual, or more absorbed than usual, or something was up. And I don't know whether it could be the time change. We just went through daylight savings time. It could be the change of seasons.
Yeah.
Not only do your circadian rhythms change, but allergens come out, and so that maybe it's that. It was a full moon. This beautiful moon this week. Okay, a full moon. I don't know. I just don't know. But something seemed just a little bit off.
Right.
The other thing that happened during this week, and again, it could just be my tiny little world that I occupy. There was in each day there were numerous discussions about cell phones.
Right.
I don't know why. This week it was like cell phone week, right? Now, parents were always talking about their kids being addicted to cell phones. That we deal with every day. But this week, more and more adults were commenting on cell phones, about how partners use cell phones, or I don't know. Anyway, it became a topic, for some reason, a recurring topic of conversation this week. So I thought, figure out what's going on here. Why now? Why is this coming up? So I go into the internet and say, well, what's going on, and do some research and see what's going on. So what struck me as I went back to look at articles is that many of these articles about put your cell phone down or unplug from the internet, they go back to 2011 and 2012. And I'm thinking, wow, we've been getting this advice for a long time. The smartphone came out in 2007. So within a few years. So then I read into this article, and it was entitled, "Now More Than Ever, You Need to Put Down Your Phone." And it's a guy who has a website. And he said, he begins the article, first of all, it was written in 2020.
Right.
Okay. So that was, I said, oh, 2020. And it's time to put down your cell phone. Things have gotten infinitely more complicated in the last 3 years. We're talking about pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
I mean, he wrote this article. It appeared in 2020. He wrote it at the beginning of the pandemic. Well, as everybody knows, things are very, very different now. But in this article, he says, it's almost quaint to think of what the internet was like back in 2008. And it was in 2008 that he first recommended that people take a sabbatical, take a break from your cell phone. So this is within a year of its appearance. People are beginning to advise us to take a break from our cell phones. And to me, that was striking to me. Wow, maybe there is something here.
Right. Yeah, it's funny. And the thing that we so often focus on are like the physical and mental health aspects of it. There was lots of talk for years about blue light and how it interrupts our sleep cycle, and how staring at screens and computers all the time affect our eyesight, and more cases of carpal tunnel and all of these physical health things, but then of course loads of mental health things. I think that one of the reasons why cell phones came up so much for me this week, because I experienced the same thing, was really because of working with teens who have access to things now with their cell phones that they've never had access to before. And that's creating and causing a lot of problems in their lives. They now have access to people and to different things that, you know, in the past they would have never experienced, simply because they didn't have access to it, and now they do.
Yeah, and that's that whole kid problem. It's what we talked about with the social media and teenagers, that talk we did a few weeks ago. Yeah, and we know about all the physical problems. I didn't know that we had something called computer vision syndrome.
Yeah.
Digital eye strain, you know, that sort of thing. But I think most of us are familiar with that. I saw another one that said, when you're looking down at your cell phone, you're compressing your respiratory system, and that's going to, and I hadn't heard that one before either, that you're going to be more anxious because you have less oxygen. Okay, so that creates anxiety. I had not read that before, but most people know about the dopamine addiction. Okay, that cell phones are very rewarding, and so you produce more dopamine and you keep doing it. What there's less information about is cortisol.
Right, just stress.
And what cell phones create is a sense of obligation. You have to respond. Okay. A sense of obligation increases stress. Stress produces cortisol. Cortisol damages your body. Okay. So why do phones make you anxious? There's a biological domino effect, of which I typically don't think. I don't think much about the cortisol effect. Everybody talks about dopamine, and we need to talk about cortisol as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then there are the mental health risks, which are they're long lists. Right.
Because, you know, and we've done podcasts on it before, but thinking about, you know, the misnomer of social media, where the research has demonstrated repeatedly that, you know, the more you're on social media, the less socially engaged you feel. So people who use social media more often report feeling more lonely than people who use social media less often. And so we have this idea that social media and technology, which is the vehicle of social media, it connects people, and it does do that to some extent, but it is not a replacement for face-to-face interpersonal interactions. And so we have this obvious, clear trend where the more use you have of technology, especially cell phones and things like that, the more you use it, the more stress, the more anxiety, the more depression, the more overwhelmed. You know, we've talked many times about using words like addiction and things like that, but it is clear that it has an effect on our mental health, the more that we use our cell phones.
Right. You know, I think it's one of the truths, and I use that word cautiously, but carefully, but being in the internet, you know, the movie The Matrix, you know, I have to rewatch it or watch the whole thing for the first time. When you're in the internet, it's a very stimulating place to be.
Sure.
In fact, it's an exhausting place to be, because it's information overload. That's what we like about it, because it keeps stimulating us, but it also overwhelms us. It overstimulates us. Okay. And when you are in the internet, and I like putting it that way, you are in a cognitively exhausting arena. Okay. And you know, people say, well, I'm going to take a break from my work and check my phone. You're going from intense workout to more intense workout, because that's not relaxing. Being in the internet is not a relaxing place to be. It's an overstimulating place to be. Okay. People tend to lose track of time. You know, we talk about going down a rabbit hole. One of the first things a friend told me when she discovered Facebook is, she said, my gosh, I looked up and I had been there for 4 hours. Completely lost track of the time. It's all interesting. Okay. When you spend that much time and you lose track of time, you're giving up other activities that you should be engaged in. Okay. So there are lots of, you know, in the whole pen and paper thing.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but there are times when I just want to write something out because it allows me to think through a problem. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, there are all these mental health concerns. And the other one, final one that fascinated me was, and I think about this because of some people I know well, depression and anxiety is probably aggravated for people who are depressed or anxious, who have depression or anxiety. Cell phone use is probably a very different problem for them than it is for people who don't have those diagnoses.
Right. Yeah. You know, many times, you know, how many times, I guess we could say, how many times do people talk about, you know, being depressed or being anxious, and then they go on Facebook or they go on, you know, on their phones, and they see other people living the life of their dreams, only exacerbates their anxiety and depression. It makes things worse for them.
Right. Now, when I see people now say, "Oh, I got to take a break," and they grab their phone and that's not a break.
Right.
You're not taking a break when you, and I don't care how do you want to sell this to me.
Right.
You entered that world.
Yeah.
Your smartphone is the internet. You enter that world, that's
Right.
not a relaxation. I don't care what you want to say about it. That's not relaxing. You're not taking a break.
Well, and it is doing exactly what we tell our kids not to do. You know, we tell our kid, if our kid's being bullied, you know, digital bullying, or they're being bullied through social media or something, we tell them, you know, just stop going in there, stop looking at it, and you know, and we know all the problems that's related to that. We know that it's really difficult for kids to do that, for many different reasons, but here we are depressed, and we're going online and looking at things that's making us more depressed. And
and I think
exactly the same thing that we're telling our kids to stop doing.
Right. And I think of those kids, and Bernie, you and I have talked about this many times. You have these older teenagers, 18, 19, 20, and they say, "Oh, I'm overwhelmed. I'm so anxious. I just need to take a break. Okay, I need to just take a break." And so they go into their cell phones, and it makes everything worse. You know, they're creating the very stress that they want to escape, and it's going to make it worse. The other point is that when people reach for their cell phones to avoid dealing with unpleasant experiences, in other words, I'm having so much stress, and you grab your phone. Now you've derailed your ability to manage your stress. Because instead of dealing with those emotions, you're jumping into another place,
right,
and you're ignoring it. And so over time, you lose the ability to manage your emotions.
right.
Okay.
And while we just, you know, we spent a good portion of this podcast already talking about that's not even the real thing that we want to talk about, as it relates to the issues that we see that are really starting to take hold as a major problem with especially our cell phones, but technology in general. And that is that, you know, we're going to talk about the reasons that we should put our phones down is not just our physical health, not just our mental health, but my goodness, think about our relationships,
Right.
Our relationships with our kids, our relationships with our partners, other family members, other friends. Think about the influence that our cell phones have on those relationships.
That's right. And if you're not going to do it for yourself, if you're not going to do it for physical health reasons or mental health reasons, do it for your kids and do it for your partners.
Yeah.
Right. There was a great book written, this is, again, years ago, called The Big Disconnect, Protecting Child and Family Relationships in the Digital Age.
Yeah.
And she's written this whole book about don't let your cell phone interfere with your relationships with she talked about kids, but also we have to talk about partners, because it's happening to spouse relationships.
Right. Absolutely. You know, when we did you mentioned the social media workshop that we did a couple of weeks ago, you know, one of the things that we said in there is that kids learn from watching. And the reality is that many times kids, you know, parents will get really upset when kids do this, but perhaps appropriately so. Kids will say, you know, why do I have to put mine down when every time I go in there, my parents are on their phones?
Right.
They tell me to put my phone down, to and go do something else, but they don't look up from their phone when they tell me that. They're looking at their phones the whole time. They're saying that I need to go do something different.
That's right. And this is especially, I mean, it's true at every age developmental stage, but from birth to 5, You know, the American Academy of Pediatrics came out recently and said nothing from birth to 2. Okay,
Right.
just forget it. One of the reasons is because children learn to read facial expressions and tone of voice by dealing with their parents. They see their parents' faces and they learn all that. If you're not interacting with your children, physically, directly interacting eyeball to eyeball with your children, if you're on your cell phone, your head is down, and you're doing this, your child is not able to learn those early developmental skills of emotional regulation, emotional recognition, empathy, all those things that should develop by watching a parent.
Right.
That's taken away if you're on your cell phone. So young children learn these things by watching our faces and our tone of voice.
Right. So yeah, birth to 2, they say no screens really at all. And even from 3 to 5 or 6 or so, they say maybe an hour a day, but only an hour a day with the parent sitting next to them.
That's right. So you have,
and they get that interaction.
It's a person to person interaction. You are in their face, so to speak. Okay.
Right.
But you're doing it in real time with real people. And that's how kids are going to learn from birth to 3 or birth to 4. Okay.
Right.
The other thing being on your phone, it tells your kids that this is more important than they are.
Right. Which is very sad, but it's true.
Yeah. Right. And it's also true for partners.
Right.
If you're in a room with your partner and your partner's on her phone, what you're going to do what's most important to you.
Right.
And your partner say, well, no, we're in the same room. No, if you're on your phone, you're talking to somebody else. You're focused on somebody or something else. You're not focused on me. So the same holds true for adults, for partners. Okay.
Yeah. And well, for all of our relationships, because if you're in a situation where you are more interested in what's happening on your phone, more interested in, getting likes or reading comments on something that you've posted or sending text messages or something like that, you're seeking that reinforcement and that chemical engagement, just that reinforcement engagement. If we go back to dopamine and things like that, you're looking for that through those digital means and not through interpersonal with your partner or with your friends or with your family or whoever's sitting there in the same room with you. And so you're going to keep going back to your cell phone and ignore the person sitting here, just a couple of feet from you. And we see this. And if you want to witness it firsthand, look at your teenagers when they have a friend over. They will sit in the same room and text each other.
Right.
They're literally sitting on the same couch and they're messaging each other in a group chat and it's so they're not getting that reinforcement or anything with their face-to-face in-person interactions. They're getting it through these digital means, and that is really negatively affecting relationships significantly.
That's right. I had a discussion with one of my adult children because we have this argument all the time. I will be talking to him and he will suddenly just pick up his phone and start texting. To me, and we had this discussion, to me, he's stepping out of our conversation and going into another conversation. And he says, no, that's not what's happening. I'm really focused on you. And I can't convince him that when he turns his attention to the phone, it's like turning his attention to another person. Okay. Right. And when he's there, he's ignoring me. Right. And I'm having a very difficult time because we have different views of a cell phone. I see a cell phone as a person.
Well, but I think that's a fascinating example. And I didn't think about it until you just explained it like that. But that is a perfect example of why social media isn't considered social. That interaction, that texting isn't considered talking to another person.
Right.
Social is interacting with other people. If you don't see your cell phone use as interacting with other people, as you were just describing with him, then you're not going to see it as an interruption from that perspective. You're going to see that you're interacting with a device. And maybe that's one of the reasons why people feel more lonely, because they know that they're just in a phone. They're not engaged with someone directly. And that might be a component of it.
Right. Yeah, we argue about it all the time because and I have adults who do the same thing. They say, no, no, I'm not ignoring you. I'm with you. I'm here. I'm engaged. No, you're not engaged.
Right.
You're switching from that engagement to this engagement, and I want your attention. I want to have your attention for a sustained conversation.
Right.
And if you're not going to let me have that with you, it would be the same as you walking out of the room.
Right.
Okay. So there is a generational divide here that we need to come to terms with, but you are ignoring the other person. Please, we need to be clear about that.
Absolutely. And there is a substantial difference in interacting with someone face to face than interacting with people in real life connections. And if you want to experience that, step into a school and look at the effects that the last few years have had on the way that kids and teenagers interact with each other. We just went through a few years where, arguably for justifiable, I suppose, reasons, the vast majority of interactions were digital, were virtual. Kids talk to each other differently now than they did 3 years ago. Right. They just do. It's just the reality.
Right. Yeah, changed.
And because of that, they interact with adults differently. Right. They interact with each other differently. And so all of these relationships are different now. And I'm going to be very controversial here and say adults interact with kids differently now than before. True. It was very easy when we were interacting with students, working in the schools, when you're interacting with students and you're only interacting with them virtually, it is very different. You talk to them very differently in that medium than you do sitting in a classroom. That's right. But when you've done it for a few years now, it changes the way that you talk to people interpersonally. Right.
One of the writers said there's a substantial difference between digital connecting and real life connecting. And I thought, and then I thought about us, the relationship that you and I have. When I text you, it is completely different than when you and I are sitting in your office talking.
Right.
Yeah. You and I will go outside once in a while and talk as you're getting in the car. It's a completely different interaction. It's almost like you're two different people. There's a digital Berney and there's a real life Berney. Okay. It's a completely different experience.
Right.
That you and I have.
Right.
That when you and I communicate via text.
Right.
Completely different than when we're in the same room talking to each other.
Right. Absolutely. So, that extends to all other relationships as well. So, when we think about how much we're using our phones, when we think about how much we're plugged in, we have to consider, the influence that it's having so that we back off and stop emphasizing it and relying on it so much. And one of the websites that we're linking in the show notes tells us, 5 good reasons for putting down your smartphone. Five good reasons. And the first is one that I know that you really enjoy talking about.
Learning styles and multitasking.
People always say, well, they're multitasking. But you really can't multitask. You can do 2 things at once, but that's not multitasking. You're switching. Right. You're just switching from one thing to another thing. And some people can switch between things faster.
You can. I mean, you can have 4 or 5 devices open and you're switching from one to the other, but most people can't do that.
Right. But
kids can't, I can tell you.
It's not that you're really thinking about all 4 or 5 things at one time. You're thinking about this one, then you're switching and you're thinking about this one, and then you go back to this one and you're just switching faster. That's all. Right. But most people can't do that.
Yeah. She said 5 compelling reasons. I couldn't find a date for this article, but I took 3. There were 2 that we can talk about some other time. But the first one is you don't multitask. The brain doesn't multitask. Number 2, you can't be present with people in real life and be on your phone at the same time.
Right.
We should stop arguing with each other about that. If your spouse tells you that you're not present because you're on your phone, please believe what he or she is saying to you. Right. They're telling you the truth. You cannot be present at both. Okay. And then it's most of us believe that I have to be careful here because some people I'm very close to. It's worse to miss something in real life than missing something on the internet.
Right.
Okay. Sweetheart, if you have to make a choice, miss something on the internet. Don't miss something that I'm trying to explain to you right now. Okay.
Right.
And I'm not the only partner.
Right.
I know that many, many, many people come in here and have that same concern or complaint that, my husband or my wife is, and it works both ways. I mean, I have wives coming in and saying, my husband's on his phone when he's at home. Okay. Which means he doesn't care about me as much as he cares about that.
Right.
I have husbands who say, my wife is on TikTok and not talking to me.
Right.
I'll give you, people say, well, it's not the same. Go give your cell phone or your computer a big hug.
Yeah.
What do you get back?
Right.
Now go hug another person.
Yeah.
It's different. It's different.
It is different. And I think that, it's funny how that writer put it. It's worse to miss something in real life than to miss something on the internet. But yet, you could be having a very engaging, intimate conversation with someone, and you hear the notification on your phone. It immediately pulls you from it. Whatever's happening here. And then you look at it and it's like, oh, it's just reminding me that I need to drink some water. Or it's telling me that I need to,
need more steps.
Yeah. And you've just now broken this connection that you had with someone here. You've broken it to check something that was inconsequential.
Right.
And we have to be more mindful of that, because that, I think, is some of the things, one component of things that's really damaging relationships.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. And, the Jews have this Shabbat, the Friday night, Friday night to Saturday night, where they just take a break from everything. Okay. And maybe we need a phone Shabbat, where we just say, and that's what some people recommend, is just have a day a week or times that, but we can talk about that another time. How do you do this? How do you make this happen? What do you do? Because we're all attached. We're all addicted to our phones. It's not a problem. Just admit it. We're all addicted. But how do you deal with that addiction? Okay. And we can talk about that in another podcast, but maybe it should begin with, you need to take a break. You need to, occasionally you have to separate. And please, please, please don't put the internet in front of your partner or your children. Okay. And that's what most of us are doing. We can be in an intimate conversation, but if we get a notification, you shift attention to what's really important, and that's your phone. And that's not a message you want to send to your partner.
Absolutely. And again, as we've sort of emphasized throughout this entire thing, we are talking to parents, we are talking to adults, because this is something that adults struggle with just as much, if not more, than kids. So, and adults are on their phones just as much, if not more, than kids. So be mindful.
Yeah, you and I were surprised. We were surprised by that Instagram data that said that, the biggest Instagram users are actually people in midlife, in their 20s and 30s, in their 30s. It's not teenagers. It's adults who are up to 34, 35 years old.
Right. So, yeah. So just be mindful of that, and remember that that it's okay to take a break and put it down for a bit. So, all right. Well, that's it for today.
Okay.
Enjoy your Easter weekend, Richard.
Yeah, you too. Have a good time. Enjoy. Relax.
I'll do my best. Until next time.
Okay.
All right. Stay happy, stay healthy, and forget to be afraid.